It's July already. We're now halfway through the summer rotation season, and as we did for the first time this past March, the beginning of the season's third month brings with it some buffs for the set that's celebrating its fourth season in the field. Apologies for my absence and lack of coverage last month, folks. Competing in the GP ultimately just fell low on my list of priorities, but fortunately, there's still been plenty of great videos for Grand Prix Shigane Manor, especially courtesy of tournament winner and Errors in the Weft designer Dr. Chipmunk, who is now already double qualified for Worlds 2026 thanks to her Sultai Golems run last month. Congratulations are due to Chipmunk as well as to runner-up Platypeople, who has a seat at Worlds 2026 courtesy of Chip's April GP win already qualifying her. If you haven't already, I've linked Chipmunk's full GP run last month down in the description below for you to check out, and it should be popping up on the info card on screen right about now. Otherwise, and as always, there are links in the description below for all your key resources to check out all things Revolution Custom Standard, such as the Custom Magic Discord server where you can get updates about and play the format against others, as well as check out all of the cool cards and sets that people in the community are designing, and the Revolution Compendium, where you can look through all of the cards the curators recommend for consideration in your decks, sorted by card roles. Unfortunately, Manifesto, the format's dedicated Scryfall-like search engine, is still down for repairs, so give the team behind it your best wishes as they continue working on a solution, and of course once it's back up, I'll have the link returned in this video's description. Alright folks, a bit of a briefer patch today, and especially so compared to our first buff patch back in March, though that one had the duty of catching 3 sets up on buffs rather than just 1. We'll talk about the pair of nerfs aimed at the dominant strategy of last month's GP, and then we'll get into the cards from Cybros that got a slight boost today. The big winner of last month was Golems. 4 players out of the 22-player field in Grand Prix Shigane Manor brought some flavor of Unspeaking and Unflinching Titan, with 3 players bringing Sultai Golems and 1 bringing Bant Golems. Of these 4 players, 3 of them made it into the 6-player top cut, with the finals match bringing the 2 Sultai Golem decks that remained up against each other in a rematch from Platypeople and Dr. Chipmunk's match in the Swiss round, where Chip had lost 1-2. Chip turned it around and went 2-0 in the finals for the victory, and while both decks did have some minor differences, such as Platypeople being on Extraction Mission and Chipmunk on Ragtag Squad, both decks were still centered around the strength of Unspeaking Titan in conjunction with Ozon's Blessing, as well as the other 2 Titans. Unspeaking Titan is no stranger to nerfs. It received a hit at the start of this season to shut off its ward stacking in multiples, and it's now also shedding a point of toughness. This makes it more susceptible to targeted removal like Searing Grace and our other bolt effects, as well as leaving it vulnerable to Coup d'etat without needing to flip its stats and pay the ward cost to do so. Unspeaking Titan has proven time and time again to be one of the best things to be running out into creature-centric strategies, with a sizable enough body to warrant interaction from slower decks and the ward to make that interaction awkward. While this change does meaningfully impact how well it can fight on the board and makes it more frail in the face of the removal suites we have around at the moment, I think this will continue to be a strong contender, and Golem decks may not fall off too hard. Granted, Unspeaking Titan is not the only target for adjustment this month, as Ragtag Squad is also receiving a change to prevent you from choosing the same type for both tokens it creates. Now, this was not a ubiquitous inclusion in Golem's decks, only present in half of the Golem decks in last month's GP, and only making it into one of the 3 decks that made the top cut. But Ragtag Squad has proven its worth through the 6 months we've had the Golems so far. The ability to bring any of your standalone Titans online with a single 2-mana spell made each one that sat dormant in play a more worrisome presence, as Squad could wake them up at any moment to start attacking you attacking your opponent with your Titans and repeating their enter triggers. As it stands, Squad is still a solid card. This just pushes it back towards its original intended role as an enabler for solidarity strategies rather than a secret powerhouse for decks trying to tally up their golems. We've still got the Ruins Awaken in white if you really want a way to put 2 golems into play for 2 mana, but you're now going to have to play a color outside of one of the 3 that the Titans available are in to do so. So maybe this is a solid boon for the Bant strategy. Speaking of solidarity, we kick off our Cyberos buffs with a reversion to a prior nerf. All the way back in Cyberos' first big nerf patch in June of last year, Ragecloak Shifter had its activated ability cost ticked up to 2 mana, in exchange for its buff going from +1/+0 to +2/+0. This was intended to slow down the rate at which Shifter could acquire creature types, hampering its ability to accelerate you towards Solidarity's 6 types attacking condition. Now, over a year since that change, Shifter is returning to its original glory, which is especially nice with new tools such as Errors in the Weft's Red Hot Rider, providing funky new creature types to make getting those Solidarity tokens that much easier. Now, attacking with a Shifter and Rider together is 5 types, meaning you only need to invest 1 mana to get that Solidarity condition met. Mono Red and Red Green Solidarity may see a bit of a resurgence with this change, and it's a very welcome one in my eyes. Perhaps the biggest question mark for me in this patch initially was Corpse Pyre Fiend, which is losing 2 power and 2 toughness to also shed 2 from its casting cost. My first instinct was to consider the big deck building ramifications. Keyword soup decks now have cheap colorless and or black creature to leverage any keyword soup creatures that wind up in your graveyard. The reality, though, is a bit simpler, I think, as this just provides black with a strong graveyard hate creature to compete for the spot Lurking Virkalakis has struggled to sufficiently occupy since its nerf last November. Fiend's more approachable casting cost, compared to where it used to be, makes it a solid tool to fight those graveyard strategies we have in the field efficiently, while also providing mono black and black colorless decks a new toy to couple with Data Weaver, giving those decks a form of recursion looping to keep the value train running smoothly. If you're a fan of Data Weaver, as I know the set's designer Split Moon is, I imagine you'll be happy to register the Fiend alongside Weaver moving forward. Not to be outdone, Zavik Corruptor Core is also providing black integrate decks with an appealing candidate for consideration, moving from only integrating your creatures to instead swallow up any non-land permanent when you go to combat. Zavik is the biggest compelling argument to skew towards black colorless over mono black, and while recent additions to the format like Damn to Hell and Heap Ludicon have made it hard to shed the mono black plan, Zavik now being able to loop your Phoenix's Touches and Omens of Slaughter when paired with a Data Weaver is a tantalizing synergy that's hard to resist. I think this might be best with Revolt at the Palace decks, which already have many reasons to push into white-black, thanks to the aforementioned Phoenix's Touch and Omen of Slaughter, while also being in the exact 2 colors that are best at coupling with colorless cards anyhow. Revolt wants you to be on an abundant amount of interactive cheap permanents, which works wonders with Zavik converting those into integrated resources for Data Weaver, for Lifelink and Death Touch on your permanents, or for the opportunity to swing with a 3-mana 6/5. I don't think he'll get there quite as much as Corpse Pyre Fiend, but it's a sweet buff all the same. Jetstream Cruiser is the next to get the tune-up treatment, simply gaining flash on the main body. I think this is a huge boon for Cruiser, as it being a sorcery speed commitment was the biggest ask for it as a control tool. Now that it can slip into play in place of a held-up counterspell, I think it's much more likely to see play as a reasonable means of closing out the game through targeted interaction. Being able to effectively discard a card from your hands to counter targeted removal for 1 mana at the cost of flickering the Cruiser is a huge gain that makes it much trickier to fight and much more likely to go the distance. Probably the weakest change of this patch still does have its merits. Shepherd of Steel is getting a stat reshuffle from 3/2 over to 2/4, and has had its Paradox and Death triggers reworked. It no longer moves counters off of it when it dies, but also is no longer bound to put counters solely on itself when you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand. It can't target a creature more than once with this trigger each turn, which does limit its ability to spiral out of control, but with discharge spells being tethered to creatures in play, and wander costs similarly being repeatable casts from the battlefield, Shepherd has some funky synergies available to it to let it start accruing value more steadily. We've arrived at last to the big package of buffs today, the Temur Spellslinger package, which has largely been lackluster outside of Savvy Smith's adoption into the core of red-blue strategies. We're getting 2 big stompy payoffs for this strategy getting a boost, as well as a duo of interactive blue spells. Lagaroth is probably the most exciting option here, shaving the requirements down on its 2 ability-granting checks by 2 instant or sorcery cards apiece, totaling up, at the cost of reducing their impact. It has +1/+1 on its base stats, but no longer gains Ward 5 on its first condition, and only gets +6/+6 on its second rather than +10/+10. But the condition for haste is now reduced from 5 instant sorceries to 3, and the condition for the stat bump is reduced from 10 down to 6 instant sorceries in your graveyard. While this does lower the ceiling of the card a sizable amount, it no longer has built-in protection, and is 3 points of power and toughness smaller than the previous incarnation at its maximum payoff. The climb to reach that ceiling is just so much easier like this, so I think the overall strength of this card has gone up a decent click. I can see Lagaroth absolutely rocking people's days at the heart of a Sultai Control Reanimator strategy, looting it away with Industrializes, and bringing it back with tools like Ruiner's Hijacking to hit for 12 out of nowhere, or even just being able to hardcast it from the hand as game goes long. The other flashy threat to get a boost here is Gaigeka Tide of Victory, which now inherently has the buff it would gain from the +1/+1 counter it would have given itself, shedding the ability to give it a +1/+1 counter entirely while lowering the thresholds of counters needed to permanently animate it by 1. Gaigeka is a card I've wanted to make work since its introduction to the field in May of last year, and this buff goes a long way to amp up the pace with which it becomes a meaningful threat for the opponent. Between A Journey Begins helping to find it, and Aonuma's students being able to slip Gaigeka into play with its adventure, I think a green, blue, or Team or Spellslinger deck is looking more viable now. No notes yet on whether or not this is going to be available as a Brawl commander, but with the commander change coming for official Magic on vehicles and spacecrafts, it's very possible Gaigeka will also be allowed to be your commander in upcoming future Brawl tournaments, whether it happens next month or down the road. As for the spells you're meant to be slinging, Forced Ejection has been upgraded from an unsummon with upside to a disperse that can become a half-cost kicked into the Royal if you've already cast another instant or sorcery before it. I'd already started coming around on Forced Ejection as is, but now it's even better, so it's just a big gain all around. This card is really efficient, and if you can have that condition online, it is going to be a huge, huge boon for you. It kills tokens. Lastly, we have Repulsion Field, which is going from retargeting the countered spell if it's targeting you or a creature you control, to instead let you steal control of the spell entirely if it's an instant or sorcery, and then retarget if you'd like. Beyond just retargeting removal spells, this now opens the path to steal something like an Ozon's Blessing, Chronicle of Precedence, or any other form of value, instant or sorcery, to tear into the value generated by the opponent. While the cost to cast Repulsion Field can still be awkward, the theft of the spell makes it a fair bit more valuable when used to shut down cantrips, card draw, or any other attempt to assemble resources over you or deny your own. Listen, X's 4 counters a flashbacked Chronicle of Extinction. This is huge. And not only counters it, but can make your opponent lose their hand instead of you losing yours. That's a big gain. And that wraps up our patch review for July 2025. We're now halfway through the season and halfway through the year as a whole, so I'd love to hear your takes. What are cards you've been meaning to play more of? What ideas are these buffs giving you? Shout your thoughts out in the comments if you have them, and until next time, take care everyone, and I'll see you in the Revolution chat. And maybe also see you for some Curator Cube. It's that month again. Take care everyone.